It's time for a little comedy, a little content, and a lot of conversation. It's the Geno Jones Show, exclusively right here on YouTube. And now here's your host, Geno Jones.
It's the weekend. What's happening, everybody? Not just any weekend. Listen, it is the unofficial beginning of summer. We kick off this Memorial Day holiday weekend. It is time for the Geno Jones Show, live right here on my YouTube channel. Thank you for joining me on this Friday night. If you're watching me on Friday afternoon or maybe Friday morning, depending on where you're watching me, I do this live. The Geno Jones Show, live Monday through Friday, right here live on my YouTube channel. So please like, share, and subscribe. Let me say that again. Help a brother out, an entrepreneur, a growing, a blossoming, a blooming media company. Yes, my own media company, which features the Geno Jones Show right here on YouTube. So like, share, and subscribe. Let me say it again. Please like, share, and subscribe. You, your coworkers, your church members, your kinfolk, your cousins, relatives you didn't know you had, folks you don't even like. It doesn't let everybody you know. Listen, this is the show. You got to check it out, all right? Go back and binge watch over the weekend, over this long Memorial Day holiday weekend. But please, you and everybody you know, spread the word. They need to like, share, and subscribe so they will not miss an episode, and they can go back and binge watch all my previous episodes right here on my YouTube channel. And if you'd like to be a sponsor, if you'd like to advertise, if you'd like to have me, the king, not the king, the king of pitchmen, holla at your boy. I'll give you some information at the end of the show on how you can reach out to me. I'd be honored to have you as a sponsor. I'd be honored to have you as an advertiser. I'd be honored to be the pitchman for your product, your business, your good, or your service. I got a very special guest. Hopefully we'll have two. I'll have a panel, but I know one of my guests is here, and I'm just going to get right into the show. All right, we kick off this Memorial Day weekend. Like I said, the unofficial beginning of summer, the season of barbecues with burn up food and beaches with sunburned bodies, right? Right. Yeah. Oh, by the way, yes, black folks, yes, we can and do get sunburned. Yeah, I learned the hard way. For years, I was like, oh, black folks, we can't get sunburned. We got melanin. We good. We just like, man, we Superman and Superwoman. We can't get sunburned. Psych, wrong answer. I was wrong. Okay, so to my brothers and sisters out there, yeah, you're gonna be laying out in that sun. The baby oil will get you burnt up. I'm speaking from experience. You'll be out there cooking like some meat on a grill, lying out in that hot sun, just rubbing yourself down with baby oil. I'm speaking from experience. So you're gonna need to get some of that sunblock too. I'm just saying. But as we celebrate the lives and memories of men and women who gave their lives defending this country, fighting for people going over to foreign lands, fighting for freedoms for people in foreign countries. Many of our ancestors who were involved in that fight, like my late grandfather, rest in peace, power in paradise, Conway Jones, and my late father-in-law, rest in peace, power in paradise, Mr. Elbert Hill, who was over in Korea, fought in the Korean War. Many of our ancestors fought for freedoms that they did not have here in America. Also, Memorial Day marks 100 years since the Tulsa Race Massacre. You may have heard about the Tulsa Race Massacre. You might not have heard about the Tulsa Race Massacre. In most cases, you probably did not learn about the Tulsa Race Massacre in school, in your classes, in your history books. But today and Tuesday, it's going to be a two-part episode. You are about to learn. They say you're about to learn today. You are really about to learn today about a thriving black community in Tulsa, Oklahoma. Thriving black community, black-owned banks, grocery stores, hotels, movie theaters, and other businesses. It was known as Black Wall Street. Yeah, people owned, they owned businesses, they owned property, land, and everything. And it was burned down and bombed by white mobs there in Tulsa, Oklahoma, and they probably came from all over America, that killed at least over 300 people. So today, my guest is Professor Damon Fordham. He is the professor of history. So we got a real live, legit, the brother got the receipts, the credentials, the resume, and the brains. So you about to learn today. He is the professor of history at Charleston Southern University. And let's not waste any more time. I'm bringing him to the camera. There he is. Ladies and gentlemen, let me welcome Professor Damon Fordham. So let me say, Professor Fordham, on this Memorial Day holiday weekend, I want to thank you on camera for taking time, because you know you could be on I-26, on the interstate, or on 95 on your way to see grandma or some kinfolks to go ahead and get grilling, because we're fully vaccinated and we've been waiting a year and a half for this moment where we can hug and kiss our mama and get on the grill with our cousins and kinfolks and cuss and lie and have fun and do all that other stuff, smoke and drink, or just get together and just fellowship and just have a good time as family. So you are part of the Geno Jones family. I want to thank you for joining me. Welcome.
Welcome. I'm very glad to be here.
So listen, I'm the entertainer. You're the historian on the show. So let's just start off. I want you to start off explaining how the Tulsa Race Massacre, how it evolved, why did it happen, and exactly for those who don't know, and unfortunately too many of us, not just black, but white, because this is not black history. This is American history, and it's been neglected, ignored, and not taught. And now you got states that are trying to pass laws not to teach American history. So Professor Fordham, Brother Fordham, I'm gonna drop the mic. I'm gonna pass the mic to you, and I'll just let you start at the beginning.
All right. Well, before I get into the massacre, it's important to describe what Tulsa was like prior to the massacre. One of the definitive records of the Tulsa massacre of 1921 was a book by a very unsung lady in history by the name of Mary Jones Parrish.
Wow.
This is her right here. She left a testament of the Tulsa riot called Events of the Tulsa Disaster back in 1921. And I'm happy to tell you that I'm one of the few people, probably the only one in Charleston, that has a copy of this.
Wow.
Found it some years ago.
Now let me ask you, let me jump in. So not to mention that, wow, she kind of reminds me, favors a younger version of my mother, and it's ironic. Her name is Mary Jones. So she got married. But her maiden name is Jones, correct? Because you said
correct. Hey, could be. You never know. I mean,
and wait until you hear this, Professor Fordham. My mother's name is Mary Alice Jones. Her maiden name is Jones. So it's amazing. So I just thought that point of privilege. But
no, you're good. You're good.
Go ahead. So how were you able to obtain that? Was it just being a history? You just somebody, as they say in the streets, you got a plug. Somebody plugged you in.
Well, no, I mean, I read of the existence of this book, and I just looked it up online and found where there were a few copies available. Unfortunately, I had enough in my account to cover it, and so there it was. This is what I do.
Wow.
Because see, too often what we have are hoarders of knowledge. Yes. You have people who get these things and they keep them to themselves, and that's not good. And because so many learned people stay behind the ivory towers and don't go out to the average Jane and Joe who needs this stuff, you have all these internet frauds and all these characters just confusing people all over the place. When I always tell the people who really know these things, you see, Confucius said over 2,000 years ago that knowledge is not good if you keep it to yourself.
Wow, I couldn't say it any better. That's a drop the mic statement right there.
Oh, I've got plenty more.
I know. So we'll go ahead before I interrupt. Go ahead and finish telling us everything of course.
She came from Rochester, New York, to Tulsa in 1918 to visit one of her brothers, and she said that in Rochester there were a limited number of black people, and there were very few hotels and barbershops and that sort of thing. And she said this about Tulsa prior to 1921. Every face seemed to wear a happy smile. The peace and happiness was destined to charge to a deep and quiet sorrow, for it was this time that the hand of the World War felt keenly here. But she goes on to say that while she was there, she said that on leaving the Frisco station going north to Archer Street, one could see nothing but Negro business places. Going east on Archer for 2 or more blocks, There you could behold Greenwood Avenue, the Negroes' Wall Street.
Wow.
And that's the first mention of the place is Black Wall Street. And she goes on to say, an eyesore to some evil-minded real estate men who saw the advantage of making this street into a commercial district. Okay? But she goes on to say about the number of Black libraries, movie theaters, as well as hotels, several major schools, a large number of major churches and all and such. Now, to keep in mind, Tulsa was still segregated, but she moved from Rochester, New York, which was not segregated,
Wow.
down to Tulsa, Oklahoma, because she was so pleased at the opportunities of Black people in a place like Tulsa, Oklahoma.
In the Deep South,
So,
we're talking about 1918. Wow, that's saying a lot.
that is correct. That says
Wow.
a lot because lynching is still going on at this point. So anyway, what upset the apple cart was on May the 31st, 1921, there was an African-American shoeshine man named Dick Rowland at a place called the Dexler Building in Tulsa. And he was on the elevator with a white girl named Sarah Page. All right. And so what we know is that the elevator got down on the bottom floor and Sarah Page screamed, and Dick Rowland, who was also known as Diamond Dick, started to run. So naturally that caused a whole lot of attention. So rumors went all throughout town, and the next day Dick Rowland was arrested. And this was the headline in the Tulsa Tribune on June the 1st, 1921 that caused the trouble. The headline said, "Nab Negro for attacking girl in an elevator." And it goes on to talk about how the girl said that she noticed the Negro a few minutes before the attempted assault, looking up and down the delivered hallway on the third floor of the Drexler Building, as if to see if there was anyone that might at sight, but thought nothing of it at the time. A few minutes later, he entered the elevator, she claimed, and attacked her, scratching her hands and face and tearing up for her clothes. Okay. Now, so there's no evidence of any of that actually happened, but that type of thing, of course, sold newspapers.
Yes.
All right. So this goes around town because in those days there was no radio or television. People read the newspapers for news. And then if people were illiterate, someone would read it to them at the barber shop or some gathering place or something like that. So you can imagine what this caused in Tulsa after that. So at the Tulsa jail, there was a mob of white men who came to try to lynch Dick Rowland. Well, that word got back into the Black community. And there was a Black policeman, by the way, on the force in those days in Tulsa named Barney Cleaver, by the way. And some people felt, well, he could help take care of the situation. It's not going to be so bad. But word got out to the Black World War I veterans. These are men who risked their lives fighting the Germans in France. And you know that they were not about to come back home and let some mess like that happen in their own backyard.
No.
So these Black men got these World War I veterans, still had guns, and they marched down to the Tulsa jail, and they faced off the white mob. And so there was Obie Mann, one of the men, a name that should go down in history. Obie Mann went up against this one white man who was a leader of the mob, and the white man said, "Nigga, what are you going to do with that gun?" And so Obie Mann said, "I'm going to use it." And the white man said, "Like hell you will." And it was on after that.
Wow.
They started, a big shootout took place in front of the jail. Now, it's important that I say this because you see, so often the picture that we are presented of this time is that African Americans were docile and didn't resist any of this stuff. And I get it because most people aren't taught these things in school. But I'm going to say something to you about that. I wasn't either. I learned this stuff from the library. And so every place in America has at least one library. And you can go to the library and ask them about legitimate books on Black history, and guess what? The libraries are free.
That's true.
But you wouldn't know this was there unless you were a hardcore bookworm like I was when I was a kid, or unless somebody told you. So that's why I'm here today. So you can go and find this stuff out for yourself, because you're not going to find this on the internet. Anyway, getting back to our story. So things would go. So the Blacks came out of Greenwood all strapped up with guns, shooting back at the whites. But unfortunately, the whites went on the telegraph and telephone wires and called in reinforcements. Okay. And this came a little bit too late for the sheriff to get reinforcements on his end. So they're pouring into Tulsa at this point, and there's another black man by the name of Horace Pegley Taylor.
I love
This
that.
man was a one-legged World War I veteran.
I love the nickname. The beautiful thing about black people, we are so colorful, even with nicknames. Peg leg.
Well, he had a peg leg. One was shot off in World War I, right?
I know, but
Peg leg Taylor led a group of reinforcements up on a hill that was overlooking the entrance to the black community called Deep Greenwood, and they were shooting these folks up who were trying to come into the community. However, the problem with all of this was that these folks were greatly outnumbered and outgunned, and this is where things really got raw and went south. Is that with all these white reinforcements coming in, that eventually outnumbered and outgunned the African Americans, and all sorts of heinous things began to happen. The whites started coming into the black community, burning down buildings, shooting up churches, and all this, and brutalizing people in the middle of the streets, shooting them up big time, and so forth. And the narrative that was being put out during this period was that Little Africa, which is what the whites referred to as the black community, where the blacks called it either Deep Greenwood or Negro Wall Street. There were these rumors that at the Metropolitan AME Church that they were storing up stockpiles of weapons to invade the white community. And that was the pretext that they used to go in and try to disarm the black community. So they were pouring in, burning down people's homes and all this, and shooting people in the street. And there was testimony about low-flying airplanes dropping gasoline bombs on the community and things of this sort. And it was just a grand mess. So the sheriff, for protection, quote unquote, you notice the air quotes there, of the black people, they started to round up the black people and put them in the Convention Hall Fairgrounds in Tulsa. And some actually went along with this because they felt that this would save them from being destroyed by the mob. But even Barney Cleaver, the black policeman, his fellow officers told him to get his stuff out of his house before they burn it down.
What? Wow.
That's right. By they, I mean the mob, not the police. And so you saw the mass destruction of schools, churches, people's homes, and all of that. Mary Parrish, whose book, by the way, they're republishing this later this year, I might add, for a commemorative purpose.
Great.
It goes into like a lot of really disgusting stories in regard to even old people being kicked out of their homes and the homes being burned. There's one instance where this family was hiding under a bed, and one of the mob came in, and some of the mob came in and started destroying things. And one little child had their hand out from under the bed, and when the white man stepped on the child's hand, the parents grabbed the child's mouth so she wouldn't scream, and they would find that they were there so they wouldn't be killed. Now, I should also add in this, in saying this, that as horrible as all this sounds, it was not unusual for this time. You also had the Chicago, as you know, you're a Chicagoan, right?
Yes.
You know about the Chicago race riot of 1919, 2 years prior to this.
Right.
There was the Charleston race riot of 1919 that I talked about on my YouTube channel, as well as the Washington, D.C. race riot of 1919 and the Elaine, Arkansas riot of 1919 and so forth. A lot of this came about because, you see, you have these black men fighting in World War II, which ended in 1918.
Was it World War I or
World War
II?
I, excuse me. Thank you. World War I, excuse me. Hey, I do misspeak sometimes.
No,
so I
just
stand correction.
No, I just wanted to.
You're good. I'm glad you corrected that.
You know, just another point of privilege. My late grandfather, who was he was 72 years old when I was born, Conway Jones, from a little small town, Yazoo City, Mississippi. He actually fought in World War I.
So did my great uncle, John Montgomery in Spartanburg. So while all this is happening, they had a date fair that these black men who came back from World War I, they were shooting Germans over there. And if they shot the Germans over there and they came back here with those guns, guess who might be next? So that was the cause of a lot of the race riots that you see during that period. And even before that, well back during the Civil War and upward, you had massive race riots throughout the country. You had the New York draft riots of going to 1863, which is the foundation of the Gangs of New York movie, which is kind of sidestepped in that movie. And you had massacres in Memphis, New Orleans, and even near Greenwood, South Carolina, you had a massacre near Greenwood, South Carolina in 1898 that the young Dr. Benjamin E. Mays saw when he was a small child. And it inspired, and he saw a mob make his father bow down and take his hat off to them in the streets. That was a massacre where a number of African Americans were killed, and that's what inspired him to civil rights work. And ironically, he became the mentor to Dr. Martin Luther King. It's called the Phoenix Massacre outside of Greenwood, South Carolina in 1898. There was another one in Effingham, South Carolina, up by Lake City, also in 1898, where a black postman named Fraser Baker was lynched. And I met his great-great-great-granddaughter before she died. And the black people and the ministers at Mother Emanuel held a rally here in Charleston to protest that. And so this kind of thing was not commonplace for that time.
Right. Let me just jump in, Professor Fordham. Don't we also have places like Wilmington, North Carolina, and Rosewood?
Oh yeah, that was
Rosewood,
a big one.
Florida.
Wilmington was one of the worst. Yes, Wilmington in 1898. I was there over the summer, and I posted about this on my Facebook page, where a black newspaper editor in Wilmington named Alexander Manley, fittingly enough, wrote an article about lynching where he said that the stories of black men raping white women were often trumped up, and a lot of times that it wasn't necessarily rape and that the white women were sometimes willing partners. Well, Ben Tillman, who was the architect of segregation in South Carolina, got up there in Fayetteville and told the white people there, you're going to let that get up there and say all this kind of stuff. And that was one of the things that led to the Wilmington Massacre of November the 8th, 1898. And I was in Wilmington last summer taking pictures and putting on my Facebook page of the sites where a lot of that took place. And incidentally, I should also mention that among the people up there in Wilmington at that time, one of the ministers in Wilmington during that period bravely escaped at gunpoint and published an account of the Wilmington Massacre that told the truth about it, that it wasn't about a group of black rowdies starting this. It was basically these mobs that came in and took over the city and overthrew the government so that they could have a white supremacist government. It was Reverend J. Allen Kirk who wrote this history, who wrote the true story of the Wilmington Massacre. He's from the Central Baptist Church up in Wilmington, but the Reverend J. Allen Kirk exposed the world to the reality of the Wilmington Massacre.
So, Professor,
I say that
finish your thought, and then I want to kind of piggyback, moonwalk back to something you were just talking about, but finish your thought right there, please.
Well, my point in saying all of this is that, again, the impression that you get, and most people get their history from the two worst places possible, and that's Hollywood and the internet. And because so many people who get into this don't do hard research, they will have you believe that our people were weak and helpless throughout all this and didn't lift a finger to save themselves and just went around praying while they were being kicked and all of that. Mr. Jones, I will say this about that. That type of history can be best described in two words. The first is bull.
Yes, yes.
All
But
right?
this is YouTube, so I'll say it for you. Y'all. It's bullshit. Okay, it's bullshit.
I'm a professional, so
Yeah,
I'll let
no,
you do
you
that.
right.
All
That
right?
is right. So I'll apologize to my mother. Forgive me.
No,
I'll
you
watch.
good. You good. You good.
I
You're
know
good,
my
man. You're
mom is
good.
watching, so I'll wash my mouth out with soap. She didn't teach me to
Well,
talk
my
that way.
mother's not here to watch this, so anyway.
So I'm saying it for you. It's bullshit, which is
There
why
you
I
go.
have you
There you
on the
go.
show to go ahead and to flush out the bullshit and
There
come
you
in
go.
with the truth. So since you mentioned Hollywood and the government, so this
No, the
question,
internet.
yeah, no. But you mentioned earlier, you said something about the government, and then you mentioned Hollywood in separate sentences.
Okay.
So this is my train of thought here. It's a two-part question. One is related to Hollywood because many of us saw this movie about Rosewood, Florida, and I wanted you to address that because that was another example of like a race massacre. And two, my second part of that question was the government, local, state, federal government, who was the president at this time, especially, I know there's a term, the Red Summer of 1919. You mentioned
Yes.
all those race riots.
Correct.
But I guess we should make it specific to Tulsa, since this is the weekend that we are acknowledging 100 years ago of this massacre. What was the government's involvement or lack thereof?
It was
But
a lack thereof.
if you want to address Rosewood, because there wasn't Rosewood, Florida, wasn't that one of the cities also that was?
Rosewood, yes, that was a case where it was another false accusation of rape that turned into a grand massacre of African Americans and destroyed the little black section of the town and all of that. The movie kind of exaggerated things a little bit, especially near the end, with I think the Ving Rhames character.
Yes.
Wishful thinking, but it didn't really end up like that, unfortunately.
Yeah.
But and there's a book called Like Judgment Day by Michael D'Orso that has a lot of good facts about the Rosewood Massacre if you want to learn from that particular thing. But now I also want to just briefly say this before going back to Tulsa and all this. With books, even with books, you have to be careful because you see, a good history book will list the sources of its information. All right. And so you have to check those sources to make sure that they're coming correct. That's what's called cross-referencing.
Yes.
And a lot of people don't know how to do that because a lot of times people get up on the internet and post any ridiculous thing. As long as it appeals to people's emotions, they're going to believe it. But you have to look beyond that because people lie. Just because it's something that you want to hear doesn't make it true. So you always have to check the sources of information before you repeat it as truth, because the people who are easily deceived are easily destroyed.
So, Dr. Fordham, could you explain to my viewers, how can they cross-reference something? They're not professionals.
Well, essentially, I understand that. Well, essentially, I don't have a doctorate, by the way, but just a master's, but thank you just the same. But what cross-referencing means is this. You try to find the source of the information that you're given. Now, in books, they have these things called footnotes and endnotes that says, like, say, they got the information from the Charleston News and Courier at such and such a date, or the Chicago Tribune or the Chicago Defender at such and such a date. So if you have the know-how to do this, you go back to those sources and look to see if they were quoting these sources correctly, okay? But then you also check other sources from that same time period, like say a magazine that was out back then. You go back and look at that, and you see that these people are quoting these things correctly, and that's where you'll know it's correct. Okay. And then now, say in modern times, for example, you'll have a story about, say, just hypothetically off the top of my head, say if Joe Biden made a sort of off-the-wall remark, right? Okay, you check other news sources to see about this. And if news sources from different political points of view give somewhat of the same information, or if there's actual film of the event that's not cut up or edited or something like that from, say, C-SPAN or something like that, then you will know it's accurate, because what people will often do is isolate things and take them out of context to mean what they want you to think it means to discredit their views.
Or in the media, since we're on media right now, reinforcing a narrative or point of view. And unfortunately, you
Exactly.
see so much of that propaganda. You know, now we got multiple networks. I'm not even going to
That's
mention
right.
their names on my show, but you've got these multiple propaganda. I call it like state television, like in Russia, the old Soviet Union in Russia. I think it was
Pravda.
called Pravda. Yes, I was going to say Pravda, which is basically state TV. It's just like, so, okay, I got to wash my mouth out again, which is just bullshit that the Russian government wants you to believe. Unfortunately, we were getting pretty close to, our version of Pravda, and it still exists, but I digress. So
Okay.
finish your thought there.
Well, okay. So anyway, getting back to the whole thing with Tulsa. So as all this is going on, you things get pretty hectic, and they start rounding up African Americans at the city convention center, and they're given passes to go back and forth during this period. And the African American section winds up in very near total destruction.
Wait,
as a
hold on one
result of
second.
this.
I just want to, for clarification's sake, you said they as in the black residents of Tulsa were given passes, or the white mob?
Yes, yeah, the black residents had to give identifying passes before they could leave and go about their business. And in some cases, you had, say, black maids and butlers had to contact their white employers to have them released on their own recognizance.
What
And
part?
these were people who were not guilty of doing anything.
I just got to say, what part did the local, state, county, federal government? And I know you, and I'm setting you up because you're going to tell the real story about the complicity here. Between,
Well, now, the sheriff, a guy named McCullough, from what I understand, he underestimated the degree to which things would go wrong in this case.
Okay.
You see, whereas with a lot of elected officials on the other end, you got to remember that by 1921, African Americans are largely disfranchised in the South.
Yes.
You see, during the Reconstruction days, and I hope you have me on for another occasion where I can talk about this in detail.
Oh, absolutely, absolutely.
The black people voted from 1865 up until the late 1800s in the southern states, until the rise of the Klan and Ben Tillman here in South Carolina, Hoke Smith in Georgia, James Vardaman in Mississippi, and Heflin in Alabama, and all these other characters.
And poll taxes and count the jelly beans. You had laws, Jim Crow laws, and also, poll taxes.
Right. See, all of that was designed twofold. Number one, these politicians, constituents were largely of the poor and uneducated mass of white people. And there's nothing that a poor and uneducated man loves better to hear than the idea that he's better than somebody else.
Wow.
So any politician who appeals to that aspect of their personalities and plays that dirty is going to be successful, as we saw a few years ago, right here in the United States.
Yes, we're seeing today. Today, I was
well,
going to say.
Yeah, that's true too. That's true too.
It sounds like, are you talking about 1921 or 2021? Because the exact same thing is happening today.
I was talking closer to 2016, but I'll agree that it's still happening today. But in either case, though, you also have to consider that the wealthy whites of that day feared that the poor whites would see their commonality in low pay and oppression with the blacks. Mm-hmm. So they poisoned the poor whites with the idea that equality with the blacks would put them on the bottom of society. Mm-hmm. So therefore, they elevated the privilege of the poor whites and gave the blacks as few privileges as possible. In other words, divide and conquer of the poor so that the rich could stay rich. And that is the reason for American racism.
Please repeat that. I've done many episodes, and that has been my commentary, a common thread. I've said that for years and years and years. But now we have a man, a learned man with the resume, the receipts, and the credibility. So please, that is so important because they say past this prologue. And that is, if you think about, you and I were talking off camera about the movie One Night in Miami with Brother Malcolm X.
Right.
I'd like to say Judas and the Black Messiah, a movie. I love that movie. I'm from Chicago, Fred Hampton Jr.
So you know the deal with Fred Hampton.
Fred Hampton Jr.'s message. He actually went into poor white areas where they had Confederate flags along with poor and working class, they called it at the time.
Patriot Party.
Dr. King, William Pepper, just get that book. I can't think of the title. I think it's something related to like killing the assassination of Dr. King or something.
I know what you're talking about, but any good book of Martin Luther King's teaching, especially his last book, Where Do We Go From Here, Chaos to Community. Dr. King's last program was the Poor People's Program, in which he tried to bring poor whites, Native Americans, Mexican Americans, and Black people together to protest the government for the inequality of income. And after he was killed in April 4th, 1968, trying to organize sanitation workers in Memphis, Fred Hampton of the Black Panther movement in Chicago, against a lot of his own people, I might add, tried to form this multiracial coalition called the Rainbow Coalition, and this is before Jesse Jackson did that, of poor white, there was a poor white organization called the Patriot Party. And these were hillbillies from West Virginia and Mississippi and Alabama and so forth, in the poor white neighborhoods of Chicago, who were looked down upon by the white Chicagoans. They were organized. He got them along with the young lords who were Puerto Ricans. These were people who never wanted anything to do with each other. He wanted to get them together to improve the condition of the oppressed in general. And so this is where they paid this street punk named William O'Neill, who never did anything constructive in his life, was doing these little stick-up gigs and all of that. And in order to, basically as a plea bargain, he agreed to be an inside man with the Black Panther movement to spy on Fred Hampton. And it was he who was paid to drug Fred Hampton on the night of December the 4th, 1969, so that Fred Hampton would be assassinated by the Chicago police. And then in 1989, when they filmed an interview with William O'Neill for PBS's Eyes on the Prize, the night after he did his interview, he walked out in the street deliberately and allowed himself to be hit by a car, committing suicide. And for all of that, for killing Fred Hampton, he got $300.
Was it 300 or 300,000 over the course of his lifetime?
$300, period.
Are you serious?
I mean, that's selling out cheap.
Wait, so for the was it 300 just for Fred Hampton? Because he continued to work for the FBI as an informant after Fred Hampton's death.
It was 300 for Fred Hampton at least.
Oh, yeah. So 300 for Fred Hampton. Okay,
cheap.
Still
selling out cheap.
Mike, even in what 60? What year was that? Was 69? Yeah, 69 on the west side of Chicago. I mean, I had relatives that lived a half a mile from that area. But so in closing, and then I want you to tease a part 2 for next Tuesday, because this massacre, the Tulsa race massacre, basically 2 main days. Now I've read in some areas it actually went for 3 days. But am I correct?
It was
2. So it was 2 days.
It began roughly around May the 31st.
So Memorial Day.
It ended up, and it ended up by the end of June the 1st of 1921.
So let me ask you, why didn't the governor send in the National Guard?
Oh, they did. They did.
To protect the black folks?
Yes, but they came a little too late.
Okay. All right. So was how, and I know you'll be honest, how complicit was, because we know the FBI under J. Edgar Hoover, he hired Bill O'Neill, and you can do your research. I know the Professor Fordham has done it. J. Edgar Hoover, COINTELPRO, then
that was way later now.
Right. But
J. Edgar Hoover would not really get involved with black issues until Marcus Garvey a couple of years after that.
Right. But let's go back to Tulsa. So how complicit was the federal government, state government?
It was more a case of they basically waited too long.
Oh, they let it happen. They just sat back and let it happen.
Right.
Okay.
But to get the National Guard involved with any of this. And in the midst of all of that, the destruction had pretty much already been done by the end of June the 1st of 1921. However, and it's important that I close on this note as a prelude to Tuesday's show, is that contrary to popular belief, the blacks were not completely defeated at this point. You see, as we're going to talk about Tuesday, they attempted to sell off the destroyed property of black people in Tulsa. But there were some brave African Americans, one of whom I had the good fortune of meeting the descendants of, and we will talk about that Tuesday.
Wonderful.
There were these brave African Americans who stood tall and saw to it that these people got to keep their land and rebuild.
I am so glad you went there, because that is one of my concerns. As a matter of fact, I'm producing the show live on camera with you in real time in front of all my viewers. I just want to extend an invitation. If there's anyone in your sphere, in your universe, that is indirectly connected, and an ancestor that really knows the history, that's living in Tulsa, please feel free to invite them on the show. You have my personal cell phone number, because that was my big concern. I actually saw a news story today, and there's all this new development in, the Greenwood district. As a matter of fact, shout out to the Gap Band, because
Greenwood, Archer, and Pine
Street. I'm the entertainer. That's been a trivia question many days on my show. Do people know how they came up with the name, the Gap Band? And they grew up the intersection, Greenwood, Archer, and Pine Street.
Pine in
Tulsa,
in Black
Oklahoma.
Wall Street.
Yes,
that's correct.
That is where.
But anyway, but it's important that I say that, because you see, too many people who get their stuff off of the internet, a lot of things that are on the internet are designed to play upon the worst emotions of a people. And because of our experiences in this country, did you know James Campbell?
I've heard that name before, so.
Mr. James Campbell was from James Island. He was from here in Charleston. He died recently at the age of about 95.
Wow.
And he was at the Avery Institute for many years. He was one of Malcolm X's instructors in the Organization of African American Unity.
Wow.
And he and I talked a lot. And I did a story with him for the Chronicle some years ago. But let me say this about that, okay? When President Obama was running for president in 2008, I was telling him about how I heard these black individuals saying this stuff about who that spook think he is running for president. And Mr. Campbell told me, you have to remember that many of our people live in a culture of despair, because so many of them had been so scarred by their experiences in the segregated era that a lot of them had a broken spirit and passed that brokenness down to the children and grandchildren. So all some of us know is defeat, despair, and pessimism. And you see, real life is not entirely like that. But as Malcolm himself once said, if you believe that you never did anything, you could never do anything. And that's why we're doing this show.
Wow, that is so profound. And I guess in closing, to piggyback on it, it's an observation that I've made. I don't have scientific data, it's just anecdotal data, but I lived as a black person. All my relatives and ancestors are black. One thing I've seen in our community, Professor Fordham, is that there's a segment of our population as black Americans that look at other black people, that would look at you and me through the prism and the poisoning of white supremacy and that white nationalist ideology that will look down upon us and say, well, the white man's water is colder and his ice is colder. And, if the white man said it, it's true. But if y'all say it, I don't know. Would you say that's a fair assessment?
I'll tell you why. Okay, first of all, it is a fair assessment. So let me cover all of that within less than 4 minutes, okay? Mm-hmm. Number one, the average person knows what they are told and what is in front of them. And so for many years, African Americans were deliberately undereducated to serve as a permanent class of cheap labor.
Yes.
But as Booker T. Washington, the great black educator, once said, you cannot hold me down in the ditch without getting dirty yourself. And for the South to waste its resources in preserving an inferior separate education for African Americans helped make the South a bastion of poverty and illiteracy as a result of that. Number two, since most people only know what they were told, they were taught white supremacy to keep them in an inferior state of mind. And one of the main things that you hear is that black people can't unite to save their lives, right? If black people are supposed to be the most disunited people in the earth, think about this. You had the Civil War, World War I, World War II, Korean War, Vietnam War, Iraq War, and the Gulf War, and all of that. If war is the ultimate test of disunity, as well as the nuclear bomb, did black people start any of those things?
Not one.
Thank you. Now, we had our wars in Africa, as well as the Rwanda situation and all that,
yes,
but nothing to compare with any of these other things that I have just described. So disunity, contrary to what you were told, is not a black problem. It is a human problem. And one story that has been falsely used to say that this is the case is this phony piece of garbage called the Willy Lynch letter. Let me say something about that. There was no Willy Lynch. There was a man by the name of Dr. Kobina Ashanti out of North Carolina Central University up in Winston-Salem, North Carolina. He wrote that as fiction in 1979, and he was shocked that so many people took it seriously.
Wow.
Dr. Manu Ampton, a colleague of mine at Merritt College, same college where the Black Panther movement started, in Oakland, California, he busted that myth several years ago. Now, my point in saying all of this is what happens when you go and read. When you read, you find that there are other ways to think other than what you have been told. And if all you have been told all your life is negative, you need to get another source of information, and the best place for that are two things: wise old people and the library.
On that note, listen, Professor Damon Ford, man, I have enjoyed this episode as much as I've enjoyed it. Any episode, I feel like I'm in class. I feel smarter. I feel stronger. My spirit more empowered. You know, I've always been a confident person, but knowledge is power. And I can't thank you enough. I can't wait until Tuesday. So Tuesday will be part 2. So we've explained to you, Professor Fordham, he's giving you the details, horrible details. What would you say, what would be your official number, Professor Fordham, in terms of how many black people were actually killed?
That's never been too clear. That's never been too clear.
You always hear 300, more than 300.
I don't know the exact number for sure, but again, I'm going to tell you how all of this ended up when I see all of you again on Tuesday. And I encourage you to bring your children along with this too, because they need to hear this too. Because you see, always remember, people, there's always more to life than what you've been told.
Professor Damon Fordham, class is now out of session until Tuesday. Listen, God bless you, my brother. And shout out to Elder Carly Town. Elder Carly, she's like a sister to me. Love and respect to you, Elder Carly Town. Because I knew, because initially I called her because I have so much respect for that sister and her spirit and knowledge. So, you know, she treated me, we really are family, and she treated me like family. Because she was, as they say, the kids say on the streets, she was my plug to you. And she plugged me right into you, Professor Fordham. So I thank her for that. And I thank you for your time. Enjoy your weekend. I cannot wait until Tuesday. You all need to send this episode to everybody you know, even your white friends. Matter of fact, your white friends, even the ones you don't like, they need to see this.
Definitely. Because see, this is not just for us, because you see, if you go through life only knowing part of the story, you're only partially educated. So you're going to need this also, because see, my teaching has nothing to do with race hatred or any foolishness like that. Because you see, again, I said earlier that people who are easily deceived are easily destroyed, and many people have been deliberately deceived over the years. And when you find the truth as opposed to deception, you save yourself from being destroyed through making poor choices.
Pow! Drop the mic. Professor Damon Fordham, professor of history at Charleston Southern University. May God bless and continue to have favor on you, your family. Just enjoy your holiday weekend. I can't wait for Tuesday, 6:30, live right here. Go and enjoy the rest of your weekend. Thank you so much, Professor Fordham, for your time once again.
Yes, sir. You too.
All right. Wow, boy. What did I tell you, man? Y'all better stop playing. This is the Geno Jones Show. We speak truth to power. It's my grandmother, rest in peace, power in paradise, Jean Jones. I'm named after her. She would say, Jeannie, tell the truth, shame the devil. And we tell the truth and shame the devil. We don't give a damn about the devil on this show. Thank you for letting me be a part of your life. As always, God bless each and every one of you. God, most of all, thank you for letting me do the Geno Jones Show live. It's live Monday through Friday, 6:30 p.m. on the East Coast, 5:30 p.m. in Chicago, 3:30 p.m. out in Los Angeles on the West Coast. Please like, share, and subscribe. Now, you see why I say that? Everybody you know, everybody. Your kinfolks, your church members, your co-workers, your colleagues, your club members, your sorority, fraternity, brothers and sisters, neighbors, folks you don't like, it don't matter. Strangers, like, share, and subscribe, and tell them to like, share, and subscribe to my YouTube channel and watch the Geno Jones Show. If you'd like to be a sponsor of the Geno Jones Show, I'd be honored to have you as a sponsor. If you'd like to advertise, I would be honored to have you to advertise. If you have a business, we got to support each other as black business owners. I'm a small black-owned business right here, Geno Media. If you would like for me to be the pitch man for your business, your company, your product, your good, or your service, if you got a product or service or good and you need it sold, you trying to reach the people, I am the king, not the king of pitchmen. Holla at your boy right here. Leave me a message on my YouTube channel, or you can email me, GenoJonesShow@gmail, GenoJonesShow@gmail. I want everybody to have a great holiday weekend. Shout out once again, in all seriousness, a special shout out to all the men and women who gave their lives defending this country. And I want to send a special shout out to men and women like my late grandfather, Conway Jones. You hear me talk about him and my grandmother every day on this show. He was a veteran of World War I, born in 1888 in Yazoo City, Mississippi. My father-in-law, rest in peace, power in paradise, my late father-in-law, Elbert Hill, from Alabama, a small town in Alabama, who fought in the Korean War. All the men and women who fought in World War I, the Civil War, in World War II, who went to foreign lands, and in Korea, like my late father-in-law, fought in the Korean War. They went to foreign lands and fought for people to have freedoms in foreign lands that they did not have themselves when they came back to America. Isn't that some ish? So I want a special shout out and honor their memory. That is a hell of a sacrifice. Can you imagine you lose your life fighting for freedoms for people that your family don't even have, and then they don't have you? So a special shout out to all of the men and women who served and defended this country, but a special shout out to the men and women who fought and served this country and fought for a country that didn't love them back. All right, everybody. I want you to have a great weekend. Shout out to Mr. Bruce Gage, the official wardrobe consultant and stylist for the Geno Jones Show. He's on Instagram. Just check him out. Do an Instagram search, Bruce, G-A-G-E. And shout out to Mark Hale Bailey, the official barber and hairstylist for the Geno Jones Show. He's on Instagram, IGKELBECUTTIN. Kel B. Cuttin. I love each and every one of you. Thank you so much for watching. Mother, you know I love you more than life itself. I hope you enjoyed this episode. Well, you enjoy every episode. I know you enjoyed this one. All right, everybody. Like I said, have a great, my Tony the Tiger impersonation. That's old school. All right, if you're like under 40, who's Tony the Tiger? Kellogg's Frosted Flakes. That's a free plug. It ain't like Kellogg's is paying me, but they need to go ahead and I need to send them an invoice for this shout out. Listen, everybody, enjoy your Memorial Day, but make sure you take time to stop and think and just say a prayer, just honor the memory of men and women who made the ultimate sacrifice so we could still have freedoms, even limited freedoms, here in this country they call America. Can't wait until Tuesday Professor Damon Fordham. Professor Fordham will be back. We hope to have Dr. Butler. She teaches at the College of Charleston. She teaches African American history. So it's going to be a fire show. All right, everybody. I love you. Thank you. Thank you for watching. Until Tuesday, 6:30 p.m. Eastern. Thank you so much once again for watching, and be blessed.
Subscribe and tune in to the next episode of The Geno Jones Show, exclusively right here on YouTube.